our final assignment. So I think the first thing that I want to talk about is this idea of form and content, and how form influences content, how the two are related to one another, and what that means in terms of this assignment, and what it actually means in terms of almost all art, not just sculpture. So form, I think the farthest I went with it before was just saying that the form is the actual, I guess in our class, it's best expressed through the sculptural idea. So it's something as a sculpture, as a form, a sculptural form that looks good from all sides. It's engaging, we might say it's dynamic even. But it has an interesting relationship between itself as an object, the other objects around it, the space that it occupies, and so forth. That's the maybe as far as I've talked about form in the past. The other part of form, however, is that connection to the intrinsic quality of material. And that's a phrase I threw out at the very, very, very beginning, but haven't really said a lot more about it. So the intrinsic quality of material is really what's the DNA of that kind of material. So we can have all sorts of minerals. We could have quartz, we could have, we could have a diamond. And those, but the intrinsic quality of a diamond makes us give it increased value because of its hardness, because of its brilliance, its shininess, and of course the symbolism that it has taken on over the years and centuries as a precious gem. And so that, as an extreme example of this, it's not just about diamonds and quartz or something, but it's about any material. And this example I'm giving it because it's kind of an extreme example where, because of the qualities of that material, we assign some other meaning to it. We give it greater value, perhaps. We give it a place as something in an engagement ring. We do all sorts of things there because of those intrinsic qualities. Okay, so I don't think any of you are using diamonds in your project. If you are, oh, cool. But we're probably dealing with other kinds of materials. But every material has some intrinsic quality. And some of you I know have chosen the objects that you're making your sculpture from because of those particular qualities that are associated with it. It might mean that, and I want you to, actually, I'm not going to try to place meaning on it that way arbitrarily, but I want you to each be thinking about the material that you're using and what are some intrinsic qualities that are associated with that material. It might be mundane uses of that material. It might be where we usually find that material being used. It might be because of a quality like its shininess or hardness or transparency or something to that effect. So that part, intrinsic quality of material, coupled with the sculptural idea, is a huge part of what I'm referring to when I say form. Content is the meaning, the story, the symbolism that you're trying to tell by putting this stuff together. I'm making the sculpture out of this stuff. I've chosen this stuff. I've made it this color. I've attached it together in this way, and I put it in this particular location because I want to say something. It's not just arbitrary. It's not just, perchance. Now, to get there, many times we do play around. We do try different materials. We do try different colors. We do experiments. And along the way, it's a process of discovery. We might find some threads of a story and we pull on that thread and we find out more meaning and can enhance that meaning by decisions we make further on down the line. You are further on down the line now, most of you, in terms of this project. And so at this point, you should evaluate your project both in terms of form and in terms of content. You know, can you still do any things that will make that relationship even stronger? Therefore, the resulting impact, the resulting effect will be even stronger. So to sum all of that up, you are trying to balance form, content, and location or site. Those three things together to try and say something. Okay. Now, I would expect that each of you at this point are at various stages or various degrees of ability of doing exactly that. I would think that each of you have concentrated mostly on one or another of those three main things along the way. And now I'm asking you as a kind of self-critique or as a reflective part of our process to now look at all three together and see if there's anything that you can either change, add to, or take away to make that an even stronger sculptural statement. Okay? So because we're doing this online, I have no idea if what I just said makes any sense, or it's hard for me to judge in looking at, you know, these little pictures of each of you, if it made any sense. So could you tell me, did it make any sense, or how do you think it relates to your piece? You know, tell me some things here. Ryan, can you start us?
Okay. So you're talking about form and how you talked about like the cultural idea and just what was it? You talked about intrinsic value and how like the objects that we use have a value due to their qualities, their what like their content. So like you said, you used a diamond as an example. So like its hardness, its shininess, like that, and we're kind of putting that into our sculptures.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to try to repeat everything I said. So
Yeah.
yeah, you
Oh,
know, I'm not.
okay.
Yeah, but parts of it hopefully either were a new idea, more interesting idea, gave you a thought about, oh, I didn't think about that part in relationship to what I am making. You know, so that's kind of where I'm coming from, and part of it sometimes is, well, I'm thinking about it. I heard what you said. I understand what you said, but I'm thinking about it now. So that's fine too. I actually, because you're sitting in your car and I'm sitting in my car, you know, I'm thinking of, well, we're sitting in an unusual place to be able to do this. This is not where we would normally do this, right? So I'm sitting in the back of my car, and now I've been here for a while, and it's not very comfortable. So I'm starting to fidget. You know, you might be, you're sitting, you have your seatbelt on. Hopefully you're not driving while we're talking. But
Yeah, no, my mom's driving.
oh, so you are driving.
Yeah. My
Oh,
mom's driving. My mom's driving.
oh, interesting. So you're on
Yeah.
the move while we're doing this.
Yes.
That adds yet another degree of our ability to communicate, right? It doesn't mean we communicate less so. It just is a different way. And and it has to do with the whole subject really that I'm trying to talk about here, in that how do we get an understanding of something, because we have all sorts of other things going on that can either pull us away, be distractions, or there's just going on in our head. And so if we're talking about our sculpture, we have to, if we really want to get our point across with our sculpture, we need to try and find this balance between form, content, and the location of that sculpture. Okay, so that's part of it. Tracy, what do you think?
So, like, for me right now, I feel like I have an overall structure of it, but then I just I just don't know where to go on from there because I'm so limited by what I have at home. But
Yes.
also, what I realize with like my issue with wanting to place it with like a bunch of trees and stuff, it's just kind of hard because I'm in San Francisco and the closest park to me is all grass and there's like no trees at all. And going to a park is kind of far and the shelter in place, but also my parents don't. Yeah, Ryan, I'll just use a green screen. Just take pictures of trees for me. I'll just put it in a green screen. But like with my parents, like they're so scared of me like going out as well. Like I'm just not sure how I can go about that. And so I agree with what you're saying. It's just I feel like there's a lot of limitations right now.
There are. Excellent. That's a good point. So I'm going to throw this out there, and you're probably going to go, oh, I don't know. But we can't be creative unless we have limitations. You didn't think about that.
I
No,
mean,
well, okay.
going out to take a picture of my sculpture is not really essential travel, and you can be fined for that now. I'm not trying to be fined $1,000. That's like one unit at school.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm not saying that to be funny, or to what? To say that uh, you're not under real restrictions. We are, but I am saying that it is true that no one is creative in any endeavor without limitations, because without limitations, well, we can do whatever, and then how do we measure whether or not that's creative? You know, we have the people that are trying to solve this virus, you know, that's a limitation. We have a specific thing, a problem that they're trying to solve, and so that's a restriction of what it might allow them to do or not do. If we look at it in terms of our assignment, then one of the big restrictions right now is it could be as restrictive as I can't leave my house at all. My folks or myself, I'm fully, absolutely shelter in place. That's what they told me to do, and that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm fine with that. But I am saying then, okay, how do I solve this problem? So it means I have to take a different kind of look at the things that are around me than the way I would normally look at them. So, right? And so I have to think, well, what's the normal way I look at things? So I could be, well, I have silverware that I normally look at those things as a way to eat. And I have a chair that I normally look at that, well, that's something I sit upon, and so forth. So now I get the issue here is now looking at things that in a different way, in a way that I have not normally looked at them before. That's, I think, that's the biggest clue I can give you right now. The biggest help for you to look at something in a way that, oh my gosh, I do have all these forks. What can I do with them? You know, maybe it's an old silverware set that's out in the garage. We don't even use it anymore, and we tried to sell it in a garage sale, and nobody ever wants it, but it's still there. You know, it's that kind of thing. So that would be one thought. Okay, we'll come back. Juliana, tell me some things about where you're at.
So I tried melting them together, like doing a test run, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't work. So I'm changing. I basically like changed my whole idea because originally with the bottles, I was gonna do it like in front of my boyfriend's apartment, but now I'm doing cardboard boxes and I'm gonna do it in front of my old, like my freshman dorm room.
Okay.
I feel like, well, I wanted each box to kind of be like representing a different part of my college journey, and that's why like I put it in my first dorm room.
Oh, I see. Because
Yeah, and I
you're
guess
still on campus, right?
ah,
You're still on campus?
Oh, yeah, I'm in Stockton.
Yeah.
Not on campus.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Got it. Just as a little kind of sidelight, when you did try to melt the plastic together, what did it do?
It melted, but like it cooled down so fast that like I couldn't get them to
Oh, I see.
really. And then like if I did keep going and try to heat up more, like it would just kind of like start making a hole. So not really become like, sticky like that.
Yeah, so it's hard to find the right melting point before it burned through.
Yeah.
Well, that's too bad. At any rate, you tried it, and you learned something more about, yeah. So with the cardboard boxes, one of the things there is, of course, you're starting out with this very specific shape. It's a geometric shape. They might all be the same size, but it's all right angles. So you can, but you don't have to stay with those right angles. You can cut into them, fold parts out, completely cut a whole shape out of it. You can play around with that form that starts as a cardboard box, but you don't have to necessarily stay there. So anytime I say something like this, where you have a multiple of one size of something, and you start altering it, it brings out the possibility of within the total number of boxes, that one's a regular box, it's a little bit changed, it's a little more changed, it's more, till the final one, it's completely different. So an evolution of form is possible when you have multiple things that start out with the same shape, and boxes are a good example of that, especially since they're cardboard and they're easy to cut into. So that's maybe one thing. And especially, and I went, the other reason I said an evolutionary thing too is because you said that part of your story was about this evolution in your education. So we can represent that. Here's where form can influence content. If the form itself gradually changes in some way, it can enhance the story of evolution, in this case, because of education. Okay, so good. Keenan.
Yeah, wait, so what did you want us to say exactly?
Well, it could be anything. We've kind of went in several different directions here each time. So you could react to any part that I mentioned to start with, or if you want to update me on where you're at with yours, or if there's any question that seems like it's kind of holding you back.
Okay. I mean, I guess the materials I'm using has somewhat of intrinsic value because I'm using like branches and stuff
Mm-hmm.
from my backyard, and then I'm also setting it up back there as well. So it kind of like, and the I don't know if you remember, but it's supposed to be like a hand.
Yes.
That's what I'm going for.
Last time I
Grabbing a
forgot,
rock.
but I remembered today.
Yeah. So it kind of like, I don't know, like just like the branches and stuff itself, pulling it from the forest and then also setting it up in the forest. I feel like, I don't know, it gives some value. I don't know.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yep. Organic, natural setting with that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was going to talk, I think early on that I may have mentioned this sculpture called The Awakening.
Yes. Yeah.
And in something in the forest, you could, your piece could actually be a multi-part piece. So in the forest, things are growing. Organic, it's nature, things are growing. This would also apply if your setting was like in a garden, or any natural environment, something growing. So you could think of your sculpture as, well, I have in one place over here, here's a baby version of it. and then a few feet away, here's another one. It's a little taller, you know, it's a tween version. And over here, there's a teenager version of it. And here's the grown-up version of it here, which is your tallest one. You know, so it's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a possibility. You don't have to do that at all. But I went there because yours is related to an organic kind of environment and form, where Juliana's, we were talking about it relating to a geometric kind of form. Both of them, I gave you guys examples of evolving or evolutionary change.
Mm. Yeah, that's a cool idea. I might use that actually. I
Okay.
kinda like that.
I mean, there's a lot of
Also,
room to play with that.
yeah. Also, I started setting it up like in a different location because the location I want to have the final piece at is like I kind of have to like hike up a little bit into the
Oh, okay.
forest, and like, I don't want to have to do that every time I try to work on it. And like also it'd probably get like tumbled over or something by the wind. So
Oh, the piece wood, you mean?
yeah, so like I have another boulder like um on this hill by my house, and I'm using that to kind of mimic um the boulder that I'm gonna use like for the final location kind of thing.
Okay.
I
Well,
think you'll get it if you see the pictures I submitted. Yeah.
yeah, that will help quite a bit. But you also reminded me of something that where we've been talking about the site or location because of its surroundings, and they relate because, I don't know, form or something like that. But I think I'm going to maybe throw this out. You ever seen trees that are growing out of what's like the side of a cliff? It just seems like, how in the world could that tree grow there? Right?
Mhm.
It seems like it's solid rock. And there's a tiny little crack with some dirt in it, obviously, and a tree has started to grow out of there. And here's a whole tree growing right out of the side of the rock. And it could be on a cliff, it could be a boulder. But that tree has been able to do it. And because of that location that tree grew, it drew our attention to it, and it actually made us think about the struggle that tree must have gone through to grow there. You know, and then you can, if you want to keep going with that story, you can kind of think of it as applying to human beings. You know, you can take that, it has the potential to be interpreted at many different levels. At one level, it's just, oh, wow, look at that tree growing out of the rock. At another level, it could be, wow, that tree is a symbol for the struggles of learning how to grow up as a
Mhm.
person. You know, so I guess what I'm saying here is you first started to say the location that you initially wanted to go there, you didn't want to have to, because it takes an effort to get there on your part, you know, to
Yeah.
climb up there every time and to haul stuff up there and everything else, so that it takes an effort. So that, knowing that, when your sculpture is done, if you decided to stay with that, any viewer is going to see that, and part of their part of the story that sculpture is now going to impart is something like struggle or effort, or, you know, that's going to be in there. And if you want that as a part of it, that location, I'd still encourage you to do it. Now, I'm not going to encourage you to do a location that's going to be dangerous to you, you know, or it's that kind of thing. But it sounds to me like maybe that spot was maybe a favorite spot of yours in the first place. You like to go there. Maybe it's an overlook. I'm not sure, but it's a place that you kind of liked. And so I wouldn't totally give up on that at first. You know, still maybe consider. Now, the other side of that argument is, no, it would be kind of dangerous up there. And even if I did make the effort, then my sculpture isn't going to last very long up there because of wind or something. And I don't know how to make it so that it will be stable. That's a different kind of question. And if that's it, so let's say that you decided, hey, maybe I do want to stay there, but I haven't solved the issue of how to make it stable. Well, then we would continue to talk, and maybe we'll see if we can find a way to do it. But that is a separate question. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Um, Riley, how about yours?
I have a lot of cardboard boxes just from, food and beer and things like that that I've accumulated over this time. And so I was, for like my idea of what it represents or whatever, I was going to do, well, I'm not from here. And so I was just going to kind of represent the 4 seasons of where I was from and how I miss having, like snow and like a real fall and spring and summer.
I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm not 100% sure of where I want to put it yet. I was thinking either here, I'm at my parents' house in Livermore, or I was going to put it up at my apartment in Stockton, and so I wasn't sure about really where. I don't think it can withstand like rain and wind and things like that because it's cardboard. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay. So one of the things, I mean, the idea of seasonal change and weather and that, it reminded me of something like a weather vane. As the wind changes, then it blows in different directions, and it's a device, of course, that people have used for a long time to indicate wind direction. Now, it's also always been a thing that has fascinated with me because why do I need that device? If I'm out there where that is, can't I feel the wind blowing? Can't I tell anyway? So it's just always been an odd thing, the way I've thought of it. But I'm bringing it up here because you might have something that you take advantage of the way the weather changes, even if we don't get full 4 seasons in Stockton or Livermore. But we do get changes in weather, and that weather does change to a certain degree because of our version of seasons. So you might have something that has you've planned for the fact that the weather is going to affect this. I don't know exactly how it's going to affect it, but I'm allowing the weather to have an effect on what I put up. And we have all sorts of sculptures that are planned that way. And one of them is a particular kind of steel. It's called Corten steel, Corten. And that steel, when the sculptor initially works with it, is shiny steel, but it is planned that it's going to rust. And so over time and with moisture, it rusts, and it rusts only to one stage that kind of creates a coating over the whole metal, and then the rusting process stops. But the sculptor has chosen that material because of one of the intrinsic qualities of it is that it will rust to a particular point and then stop. And typically, I mean, we can encourage the rusting process of metal, but most sculptors that work with that kind allow the weather, the natural process, make that happen. So that's just an example that came into my mind where I'm letting the weather or seasonal patterns have an effect on the material that I've chosen. So maybe that enters in here somehow. I think that the other way is I don't really want to do that because I feel like it's cardboard, and as soon as it gets wet once, it's not going to be a gradual change. It's going to completely maybe disintegrate. I don't want to do that. So instead, I want to stay with this idea of 4 seasons. So maybe I do something on the object that relates to the 4 seasons. Now, a literal version would be, well, I paint a picture on each one that represents, spring, summer, fall, winter. And you could do that. But there are other ways as well. Maybe you cut a shape into it. Maybe there's an object that happens. What does it look like, in the winter as opposed to the summer? Even in Stockton, where we don't get snow, so maybe think of those things that help to symbolize them.
I thought it was what you were saying. At first my idea was just to like glue them all together, but I like the idea of having, the wind be able to
turn
move
it.
the cardboard because it's not very heavy. I think that's a cool idea. And if
Yeah.
I paint, like a season on each side, could be like weather change, like climate change as it spins around. Yeah.
Yes, they're good. Yeah. So you think about this stuff, and at first as we say them out loud, it seems, oh, that's pretty corny or something. But that's how we start those ideas. And then you kind of play them through your head and you try different variations of trying to interpret it. And that's where you get there. It's the story and the form going back and forth. So I think I said weather vane there to begin with, but the other one you have is a windmill. So those kinds of things can fit in here. We have the classic windmill, that we see on farms in the West, but we also have the wind farms of contemporary ones that we see on the Altamont Pass, and we've got all sorts of ones in between there, and they're So if you like that idea, and we're going to call that a kinetic sculpture because it has some movement that's caused. It has some movement to it. Okay. All right, cool. Grisha, how about yours?
Um, so I remember when you were talking at first about how the sculpture needs to be like meaningful to you. I remember I said on the first day that I immediately thought of using my clothes, and then you were talking about making like a braid with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've been kind of accumulating the right clothes because you were talking about how it has to be like meaningful. And then so I needed to pick clothes that I wasn't really wearing, which is kind of easy for quarantine because I'm not wearing most of them. And then also it was like for me at least, like I like my whole life like thought I was like bad at art because I couldn't really draw or anything when I was a kid. And then so fashion was like my first time ever like thinking, oh wow, I'm an artsy person, and it was like the first way I ever like expressed myself. So that was like the most meaningful thing I could think of that I could find in my house. So I was using mostly like winter clothes, and then I was sorting it out based on like the clothes I wore mostly when I was like before college, and then freshman year, and then junior year of college, and then my junior and senior year are the same year. And then you were talking about braiding it, so I've like organized it, but I'm still figuring out how to braid it because I'm using like an old lamppost in my house as like the center kind of pillar to put the rope around just to give it like height because I'm 5'10", so I needed to get up. And then I was trying to figure out how to do it, whether to do like multiple like little ropes and then wrap it around like that, or like one big rope and then go up it like that. So that I'm still struggling with, but I like the intrinsic like value of my clothes, and then I also like the form of it because I feel like it's just they're all so different, like they all have different like colors and textures, so it looks really like cool. And then I had a lot of like fake flowers that were left over from the school year because I was supposed to like craft with them for my sorority, but then since the year got cut, I can't craft with them anymore, so I thought I would just like stick them in the braid to make it look prettier, I guess. But that's kind of where I am with form, but it's just the assembly now is kind of hard because I don't know like which method is going to work, since like I have like coats in there which are like really thick and heavy, and then I have sweaters too which are kind of thin, so I'm trying to figure out like how to braid them, I guess.
Yeah. This is very interesting. You can braiding was one technique that we talked about, and I still think braiding is a good possibility here, but it doesn't have to be braiding. It could be knots.
Mm-hmm.
It could be like shoot, I forgot what you call it, macrame. But the other thing I meant to mention to you is there might be something cultural that you can connect with in terms of how the fabric is connected from one piece to another. It might be a shape or a it might come from a building. It might, that is cultural, or it doesn't. I mean, it's important to you somehow. Could be a cultural importance. It could be something else. And on that thing, I guess I'm thinking buildings. There is some shape that you try to, and you look at it like. Here's an easy example: Celtic knot. Okay, that doesn't work for us here, but it's an example of a cultural intertwining kind of thing. And maybe that's something that I choose to imitate if I'm Irish, So there might be something there. The other thing I wanted to say is you certainly can use the entire coat and the entire shirt and whatever, but you can also use just parts of them. And there's a rug making. They're what are they called? They're called. They start out kind of making a rope out of old material, and then they curl it around and around and around, so it makes this big area rug, and it's very beautiful in terms of colored, and I think they're called a braided rug, maybe, or a rope rug. A rope rug sounds more. I think if you Googled either one of those, you might see what I'm referring to. If this doesn't sound familiar, but they're kind of cool, and they connect back. I think people started making them in the Depression years in the 1930s. I think. I don't know that for sure, because they were basically clothing that they no longer could wear, but they would take the usable fabrics and do that, and made these rugs, and they're kind of cool. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I think the way that you responded or reflected back to me some of the words that I was saying earlier, that's great. That's exactly the idea of using some of that and seeing it in the choices that you've already made. So yeah. And there's one other thing. I'm impressed with what you said about the. You didn't think that you were an artistic person, but because you didn't feel like you could draw, and that's something that's quite common. In fact, it's too bad, because in most cases, if you have any kind of art in grade school or when you're young, then by the time you're 8 years old, you know who's the artist in the class and who isn't, because of the ability to draw only. And that's not fair, because you can be an artist in many different directions, and some of those are drawing based and some of them aren't. And so I'm really happy to hear that you discovered that about yourself in a different direction, and yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was like, because in grade school it was like art class was like drawing and coloring, and like my grandma was an art teacher, and like she was like, so she and my mom would always be like painting and drawing, and like I was just never good at that, and I would always think like, and I also always had like bad handwriting, so I was not one of the artsy kids in elementary school, and I would like dread art class. I'd be like, oh, I'm just so bad at it, like this is embarrassing. But then in like around like middle school, that was when I really started getting into like fashion and stuff, and then I realized that there's like other ways of being creative too, like fashion and like photography and that kind of thing. But like my clothes were kind of like the first step that like made me like actually like appreciate like aesthetic beauty and like that kind of thing. So
That's
it was
cool.
that's why it was like the most meaningful thing I could think of, I guess.
That's very cool. I wish more people had that discovery, so thanks for telling us about that. Let's see, Rosa, how about yours?
The box I actually wanted to use for to represent my niece. I used it for another project for 3D design. So I was thinking of like a way to replace that. So I was thinking of maybe getting like sticks outside and put it in like a cube form, not completely covered up maybe. I don't know. I was just thinking of a way to replace that box by using maybe other material, or maybe even doing something completely else, but also, have it, be kind of dedicated to her in a sense. Yeah, and also I've been trying to get the wire that we talked about last time.
Mhm.
I think I don't know if I'd have enough wire to go like around the sculpture. I'm still not sure about that, but I'm still trying to accumulate material to use.
Okay, so a couple of things. I hope I can remember to comment on each of these. One is you brought up the idea of that you'd made something before and you wanted to. I put it in my own head of you want to revisit it and change it, make it different, add to it in some way. Maybe a different material or something like that. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So any of you, if you've actually made something before that you know you had an idea, and then maybe you weren't totally satisfied with the way it ended up, or maybe you were okay with the way it ended up, but you want to continue with it, make a different version of it, add to it. Yes, you can do that. I think that that's a good idea. If we talked about the artistic process and the idea of creativity, I mentioned that early today. That you can't truly be creative without some kind of restrictions. But if we talked about creativity also in the sciences, where we typically have a scientific method and we have a thesis to build on something, but we're most of the time we're building on somebody else's previous research. Somebody else has done something. We are now using their findings as a starting point to go further. And we might even be, it's an experiment that you did previously, and you discovered some things, so now you're going to build upon that research to go to the next level. And it's exactly the same thing in the arts. So for you, you have this previous art piece that you have some, I'm pretty sure, some good feelings about it, but you also mentioned this idea that, well, maybe can I revisit it, or I'd like to with a different material. And yes, that's exactly the same kind of thing. You're building on previous research that you've done artistically. And maybe a more common way that we talk about this in the arts is you're doing a series. So I did this painting, and then I do another painting and I learned something from doing that painting, and now I'm going to do some more in a similar style, perhaps. And so we learn from that. We learn something about ourselves. We try to get the most out of following that line of thinking or that approach to paint in that particular case. So with sculpture, same thing. We might have one version we've tried, and now I took it as far as I could on that one, and it really does. And now I want to do something else with it. So that point, yes. Let's see. The other one that I wanted to mention. Oh, the wire. So you felt that you might not have enough wire there.
Yeah,
And
there's a possibility I might not.
yeah. So you might think of, well, like other kind of things that are made from wire that you can actually use. So sometimes that might be fence wire. It might be that you take something that is smaller and you make your own version of it. So for example, string. So I essentially braid together string to make rope or cord, and then I braid the cord together to make rope, you know? So I'm starting out with that smaller element of it to get something that is stronger, perhaps, because I need something stronger. So that's another way to possibly approach this. That's hard. And I guess the other would be that, okay, well, yeah, I can't do any of that, so I need to find a different way of attaching. And actually, let me stay with the rope idea or wire idea a little bit longer. Maybe it's vine. maybe it's a natural thing. You know, I don't know if you have access to something like that, but if you live by a river or someplace where there's a lot of vines growing, then you could possibly use that. Um, the thing to be aware of if you do go that route is don't pick a vine that is potentially poisonous or something. You know,
I mean, the likeliness of that I don't think is very high because I don't really live near a river or anything.
okay,
So
I mean, it doesn't have to be river, but
yeah.
sometimes when I say this stuff, it's not, maybe I can't do that literal thing, but to just hopefully give you some thoughts that, oh, well, I can't do that, but it does make me think I could do something else, right? So that's why I say these things. And occasionally the literal thing is possible, but definitely don't get a poisonous plant. Let's see, it seemed to my, what was the other thing you said? I thought I had 3 things I wanted to comment on.
I was just talking about how I wanted to replace the box in some sort with the different materials. That's that. I think that was pretty much
Okay.
it.
I-
Although you did give me maybe an idea of because I do have like a kind of like a little area where there's grass, leaves, and stuff, and sticks, you know, that I can use, branches as well. So it's like I don't know if the wire doesn't work out, I might just like use the branches from the trees and kind of like have them, I don't know, go like that because I did say I wanted it. You remember the whole like ocean kind of idea as well?
Mhm.
So it's like I don't know if I kind of made a switch on that and just made it like focused on like that relation, that bond that me, my niece, and my sister have, which would in a sense is I don't know how to explain it. Um, I don't know.
It's a bond. And
Yeah.
since it is family, then you have that family connection. And of course, we represent that many times with what we call a family tree. And so that we have these lines that we might draw and boxes, you know, that help to try to see the relationship in a diagrammatic kind of way. But we call it a tree. So we could even go further with the organic interpretation of that, not necessarily the diagrammatic interpretation of it. And the 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 family relationship, you know, it's a weaving thing, right? There's parts of it that the thread that runs through the whole family as DNA. And there's also other parts of that that are real strong, you know, rock solid connections, and others that's very tenuous and fragile. And there's a word there that it's one of my favorite words. It's gossamer, a gossamer thread. So a gossamer thread is like a spider web thread. On the one hand, it's very strong for that spider, you know, and on the other hand, it's very fragile. It also has an organization to it. It has a beauty to it with that, but it's a tenuous thing. And so finding what parts of the relationship between, you know, the members of your family that you know, whether it's the entire family or whether it's just the 3 of you, you know, what is the bond that totally is rock solid? It's the, you know, 5-inch thick cable that runs between all of you. And what are the ones that are the gossamer thread connections? What are the ones that are more delicate, perhaps fragile? You know, so thinking about it symbolically that way as a part of the story may help you to decide what materials to use, whether it's wire or string or vines or some woven version of that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Ryan, I guess I'm coming back to you. Looks like that you made it home, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about where you're at in your process?
Okay, so I kind of changed up my idea a bit. So I'm still gonna have the no parking sign because I don't know, it's something tall that's like permanent, so might as
Yes.
well build off that.
Yes.
And I kind of want to do like a kind of like a life story type thing now
Okay.
because I'm gonna be like moving a bunch of stuff. So I'm gonna have like a bunch of like my old stuff and my new stuff like kind of all in one place, anyways.
Uh-huh.
So I was thinking about having all like my stuff when I was little at the bottom and then build up, and at the top I have like a doctor's white coat, which is kind of like what I'm gonna be aiming for, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of have like a yarn connecting everything, kind of like a pathway to like the career choice I want.
Okay. I think that's a good direction with it. And then, of course, think about that sign. It's the sign is a one-way sign, right?
As a no parking sign. So it's kind of
Oh,
like you
sorry. No
can't
parking.
stop. You have to keep going.
Yes. So you, yes, play off that stop, keep going, or no stop. You know, occasionally we see people do some kind of graffiti on existing signs, right? And they play around with it and they say write in no stop or something like that. I'm not suggesting that you deface the sign, but I think you can play off the existing words there in a creative way that enhances this your professional growth story. I think that's a very nice concept to explore. Okay.
Cool.
Let's see here. All right. So with what you've told me today, I need to remind us of a couple things. The first one is this: the actual due date for this assignment was today, right? So, and I've also said that that due date or deadline is a soft deadline or a benchmark. So I'm okay that we're not finished here. I'm okay with that. But you need to know that, okay, that benchmark has essentially come and gone. And I will be starting the talking about the final assignment here next time. That okay, now I'm going to have 2 projects I'm working on. So you just have to know that. At the beginning, we talked a little bit about the stress of trying to do anything the way we're currently doing it and balancing it with all the things you have to do with all of your classes. So I'm not reminding of us of this particular thing right now to add to that stress. What I am doing is reminding of us so that we aren't surprised, I guess, and it's a time management thing. So you know what you have for your other classes, and you know that you have this assignment to complete and one more. So you just have to create your own time management to handle all of these things to keep the stress level at a minimum. Okay? And the other thing that I believe can help you manage that is you do not have to wait. I've said this before, but I want to remind us that you do not have to wait to get feedback from me if you are stuck. The best way for you to do that is to upload things to the process or drafts folder on Canvas about your project. And, you know, in the comments section, ask any questions or what you want me to specifically look at when you do put something there. And then I can comment back on it. And it's typically a real short kind of thing. So it's not like, you know, we're probably not going to have an hour-long Zoom conference about it. It's going to be you're uploading a picture, ask a question about it, I comment on it back, and hopefully that will help you keep on track. But my main point there is I wanted to remind us that today is that benchmark deadline for the final version of this project. The part that I told this morning's group is that because we're not going to be able to do actual critiques like we normally would, with these last, we never, well, we were kind of inching our way there, but we can't really do that now. So it's going to be more similar to what I had you do with that comparative paper between the wood project and the Nevelson box project. So in this case, it's not a comparison one, but it is a reflective short paper about this sculpture that you're currently doing. And no doubt I will ask you to do the very same thing for the final project. So it's a very informal kind of thing. It's a reflection on three main parts of the sculpture: their choice of materials and form, the story that you're trying to tell as the content, and the site that it's located in that also has an influence on the overall piece. Okay, so you'll want to send in that paper to the same. Actually, what I'll probably do is create another place for you to upload the paper separately from the final. Okay, so it'll probably say something like totem paper. Okay. I think that's the majority of what I wanted to say. So as we went through, did anything else pop into mind that you want to talk about or ask me about? Yes, Juliana.
I'm just wondering how much we should be like telling our story through the structural form. Because for mine, I was planning on painting it, but I know this like sculpture class, so I feel like I'm kind of taking the cop out if I just like use the designs that I paint on it.
Oh, I understand. So you're saying that if I primarily say, well, we could think of it this way. If you didn't paint anything on it, would we still get the story? And if the
Yeah.
And if the answer, I was going to say, if your answer was no, then we would, then that would be a clue for you to know, oh, I need to do something more with the form. On the other hand, if we said, if I don't paint anything on the surface, just the form, the materials, the way that they're attached, would I get some indication of the story? And if you answered yes, then okay, good. Then you could answer, by painting on the surface, does that enhance or make the story even more clear? And ideally, we can answer yes to that. That would be perfect. Okay. But if we answer no, if we said that, well, by not having anything painted on the surface, do I get the story? And I answered, no, I don't think so. Then that tells me that the form isn't quite there yet. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. So should I still like paint actual pictures on it, or should I just paint more abstractly?
You can paint any style that you want. You can paint very realistically, or you can paint very symbolically abstract. Either way, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. That's a good thing to bring up. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'll let y'all go for today then. I did record us, so I'll be putting that up in the next hour or so, I suppose, on the website, but it'll be up there. And on Wednesday, I will probably loosely talk about the final project, because I need to start getting us thinking in that direction. But a week from today is when I'll really talk about the final project. Okay? All right. Well, stay safe, and I will see you guys later. Okay? All right. Bye-bye.